Someone Better by I_am_Ellie on AO3. Episode 27, Chapter 21, Hurricane. There was one thing scarier to Shouta Aizawa than the lack of control, and that was when things that had previously seemed as bad as they could get, and everything suddenly took a turn for the better, because that didn't just happen, not to people like Shouta. When the world got lighter and the sky looked a little less gray and the sun a little brighter, his mood a little better, it just meant he was in the eye of the hurricane. It had been like that his entire life. He had a horrible childhood, even before his father had left, and it said a lot that even he admitted that his life had been fantastic. However, it pained him to do so. He had always had Inko, but then Inko and his father had left, and all he had was his mother. His mother, who steadily coming back to the apartment less and less. But then he had UA. He had worked and worked, and he had actually gotten into the top hero school in Japan. He hadn't gotten into the hero course, but that was okay, because he could always work harder to get in it. His first few days at UA had honestly been some of the best of his life, even if no one in class talked to him because they couldn't connect with him, and all the teachers were a bit intimidated by his quirk, and he was always hungry, and he was the smallest kid in class. That was okay. That was fine, because he was halfway there. And then his mother had stopped coming home. Over and over, the cycle continued. The eye of the hurricane came and went, and the storm of Shota's life raged on. But he kept pushing through, trying to enjoy every bright spot of his life had to offer, even if the clouds were always darker, the winds always rougher, the rain always falling harder. When he came out on the other side, Hizashi had been the eye of the hurricane, and then his parents had died. He had gotten into an amazing hero agency, and he had been making more money than he expected, even if it wasn't a lot. And then Inko had died, and he had to uproot his entire life to a child he hadn't even planned for. But the eye of the hurricane had returned. The world had brightened, and everything had been okay, even when he permanently injured his E. Even when money was hard, and he was constantly stressed, and he didn't get any sleep, things had been okay. Izuku was an unexpected bright spot. But now, this was cruel, even for Shota's life. Hizashi death, and an insurmountable amount of pain. Izuku at risk of death with an infection that even the doctors were worried about. But things were getting better. Izuku had woken up. His fever had gone down, if only slightly. The pallor of his skin was improving. He was waking up more and more, and he looked even more alive than he had in days. He was in pain, and he was sick, and the doctors were still keeping a close eye on him, and he wasn't out of the woods yet, but he was getting better. Hizashi had woken up too, several times over the last few days. It was always brief and horrifying, and usually ended with more painkillers being added to his IV line because they were trying to keep him from feeling as much pain as possible, even if it was unavoidable. But things were getting better. Shouta knew better than to trust it, but he didn't want to tempt fate by always assuming the worst was always around the corner. Maybe he just needed to sleep. Shouta was sitting in Hisashi's hospital room now, because the nurse had given Izuku another dose of pain medicine, and he wouldn't be awake for another while. Hisashi's head was still wrapped in bandages, long hair pushed to the side. He looked pale, paler than normal, and there were dark shadows lining his face in the dim of the light room. The nurse had insisted on the room being kept dark, saying that Hizashi would most likely have a dreadful headache should he wake up, and Shouta was a bit grateful for the slight recept from the harsh lighting of the hospital room, though he'd never admit it to anyone but himself. It was there that the doctor found him, sitting in the stiff, backed-up hospital chair, staring at Hisashi's still form, trying not to fall asleep in case Hizashi woke up again. "Shouta Aizawa," the doctor said, knocking on the door quietly. Shouta startled slightly before nodding, sitting up. He had to stop himself from hugging his elbows, his hands falling onto his knees. He had gone home the previous night to change clothes. Thought he didn't have the patience to wear anything other than sandals because he honestly burned every pair of socks in his dresser if he could. And he had to change into a pair of sweatpants and one of his baggiest merchandise t-shirts he brought a few years ago on one of his, Hisashi's, and Nemuri's usual expansions to an amusement park. It was tie-dye, blue and pink and purple, with a giant Ferris wheel on top. It was quite possibly the most colorful thing he owned. The sweatpants had odd ridges on the knees. Because he'd spilled glue from a glue gun on them once he was trying to fix something in the apartment, and he hadn't had the heart, or honestly, the money, to throw them away and replace them. The ridges were odd, though they weren't too noticeable, and didn't burn up the fabric, and they were good to fidget with when he felt nervous. He ran his hands up and down his legs. Ridges. Yes, Shouta said. He hated his voice. As you know, a few days ago, your friend wasn't ready for surgery. Shouta didn't bother correcting him, because his body wouldn't have been able to handle it. We believe he's ready for the procedure now. Ah, Shouta said. Okay. Alright. Okay. How is this procedure going to work? The doctor was very tall, at least 5 inches taller than Shota's 6 feet, probably because of a quirk. He didn't like it. The man was intimidating. His eyes remained on the wall as he spoke to the man. Izuku probably would have known what the doctor's quirk was just by looking at him, thanks to physical attributes. Shouta wasn't quite as gifted in analysis. We're going to take tissue from another part of Yamada's body and use it to repair the tears in his ears, the doctor explained. After the surgery is complete, and he has sustained recovery time, maybe 2 days, we'll find someone with a healing quirk to heal the surgery scars. And Mr. Yamada should be okay to go home. But, Mr. Aizawa, you need to know something. Yes? I understand you have a knee injury? I saw your leg brace. Is it for chronic pain? Shouta nodded slowly. I thought so. The healing process for Mr. Yamada's ears will be much like your knee. We can do as many surgeries as we like, bring in as many healers as we must, but we'll never be able to completely heal the irreversible damage that was dealt to Mr. Yamada by his injuries. The damage was quite extensive, and we waited a fairly long time to do the surgery because of the risk of his health. Even after someone heals him, there will most likely still be damage to his hearing, though the extent of that damage we don't know yet, much like the chronic pain in your knee. I think I understand, Shouta said. So, he's not coming out of this without difficulties hearing? Statistically speaking, no, the doctor said, regretfully. I'm sorry. There are options for Mr. Yamada. Therapy to help him learn to do certain things differently, and if the situation calls for it, places he could get hearing aids, or where he could learn sign language. This is by no means the end of the world. He'll be able to live a semi-normal life after he adjusts. Shouta nodded. Okay, I understand. Thank you. Please leave, please leave, please leave. The doctor took the respectful dismissal for what it was. Of course, Mr. Yamada's surgery is scheduled for noon. A nurse will come in, take him down to the operation, he said, and he left the room as quickly as he came. Noon. An hour and a half away. Hizashi was having another surgery, but this was a good thing. It meant he was healing, and he was getting stronger, and the procedure didn't sound risky. They'd be able to walk away from this. They'll be able to live with this. They would. Hizashi was having surgery. Nemuri wasn't there, had left hours ago, so she could talk to the agency about getting a week off. Shouta pulled his phone from his pocket, and hesitated before opening the text app. He didn't feel like talking on the phone. Hizashi and Nemuri had chosen all the contact names on his phone. Watch me whip. Me. Come back to the hospital. Hizashi surgery is scheduled for an hour and a half. Watch me whip. On my way. Shouta set his phone down before rethinking it and picking it up again. Me. Call Hisashi's parents. Please. Watch me whip. Already on it. Nemuri got to the hospital first, and Hisashi's mother and father ambled into the hospital room a moment later. His mother gasped upon seeing her son in the state he was in, eyes quickly going red, as she sat at his bedside, grabbing onto his hand and gripping it tightly. Hisashi's father knocked a fist against Shota's shoulder, and Shouta tried not to wince. Hisashi's father had always been a touchy-feely kind of person. "How are you doing, Shouta?" Dai asked quietly, taking a seat next to Nemuri. Shouta and Dai's relationship had always been rather awkward. Shouta loved and respected the man. When Shouta needed a place to stay, when the walls of his old apartment seemed too narrow and the hallways too quiet, the neighbor turned him away, only made more food to accompany for his presence. When Dai found out that Shouta was dating his son, he didn't bat an eyelash, only teased him about it, and gave him a shovel talk that ended with Dai tearing up and hugging him. That didn't stop him from being slightly uncomfortable around him, though Shouta honestly tended to be that way around anyone who wasn't Hizashi, Nemuri, or Izuku. Dai and Hana were both rather emotional people, the pair only building off each other in emotions and dramatics. Hizashi had definitely inherited their love of emotional vulnerability and their tendency to cry, and Shouta had no doubt Hizashi would pass that on to Izuku. Shouta could never tell if that was healthy or not. Constantly crying didn't seem very healthy, but constantly bottling up your emotions to keep yourself from crying was frowned upon by most as well. Shouta liked to think he had found a nice median in terms of crying. Most would disagree, but that was the story Shouta was sticking with. "Fine," Shouta said. "Hisashi's getting surgery on his ear. There was an accident in our last mission. He'd have hearing damage afterwards, and the doctors aren't sure at what severity it will be." Shouta had the tendency to be too blunt in certain situations, and this was one of them. Dai's eyes went red, and his face was slightly blotchy as he began to rub at his eyes furiously. Hana choked on a small sob, silvery blonde hair falling in her face for a brief moment before she looked up at Shouta sharply. "You said our mission. You were on the mission too. Are you okay? Did you get hurt?" "I had only minor injuries. That's besides the point." Nemuri scoffed. "Yeah, if you fall getting the letter Z carved into your neck minor?" she said, rolling her eyes slightly. Hana's face fell. "Oh, Shouta, honey." "Yeah, if you fall getting the letter Z carved into your neck minor," she said, rolling her eyes slightly. Hana's face fell. "Oh, Shouta, honey, I'm so sorry," she said, and Shouta felt distinctively uncomfortable. Every time he interacted with these people, he was reminded again and again of how much they differ from his own family. Dai and Hana cried over their son when he was injured and worried over their child's boyfriend like he was their own. His parents probably wouldn't have been able to muster a tear if it's been his parents probably wouldn't have been able to muster a tear if it had been his funeral. His parents probably wouldn't have been able to muster up a tear if it had been his funeral. Dai and Hana made extra food whenever Hizashi said he was coming over. Shouta couldn't remember the last time his parents had cooked him anything. Dai teased him and grinned at him and gave him mock shovel talks that ended in hugs, and the last time Shouta had seen his dad alive was when he was 7. It was like getting whiplash, seeing Hizashi Yamada's life in comparison to his own, because for a long time, as a child, he believed that his life at home wasn't exactly normal, but there wasn't anything wrong with it. Every time he was around Dai and Hana, the little, intricate things about his life and his childhood were always in question. It was exhausting and horrifying and humiliating, and it almost made him dislike the fact that they had been some of the only adults to give a damn about him when he was a teenager, and he had no idea how to properly take care of himself. He owed them a lot, and that wasn't something he was particularly happy about either. "I'm fine," Shouta said again, like he was trying to convince himself as much as he was trying to convince them. "I am fine. Perfectly fine. It's shallow. No stitches. It's fine. Hana frowned. If you say so, Shouta. She said at the same time his phone dinged with a text from an unknown number. Shouta glanced down at the phone screen. Unknown. I will be calling in exactly 5 minutes. Make sure you are alone when I do. S. Shoei. It couldn't be anyone else. Excuse me. Shouta said, standing. Nemuri, tell them about the surgery. I'll be back soon. He found a men's bathroom and shut and locked the door behind him after making sure none of the stalls were occupied. His phone started ringing, and a moment later he answered it hastily, phone almost slipping from his fingers. Hurry, sir, Shoei said. Are you alone? Yes, Shouta said. Excellent, I won't keep you long. I'm merely calling about the mission. The man said. Of course, it was about the mission. I trust you were able to get the files of the group, even if you were unsuccessful in taking down its leader. Shoji sounded slightly distasteful when he said the word unsuccessful. Yes, Shouta said. I didn't call you right away because I thought you would need sufficient time to recuperate and heal, Shoji said. But I need that flash drive now. The police can only legally hold the leader, son, for 72 hours following his arrest. Our time is around 6 hours from being up. Do you have the flash drive on you? Shouta had been too nervous to leave it alone, defenseless, at the apartment. He carried it on his person whenever he went to the hospital. The end. That would explain the Z. Shouta felt ill. Yes, he said. He felt rather like a broken record. Excellent, Shoji said. Shouta wondered if the man enjoyed saying the word excellent. I'll send someone over to retrieve it immediately. Leave it wherever you are. Hidden, but in plain sight as well. They'll find it easily, but be far from the premise when they do. Understand? Yes, Shouta said, settling the hard drive in a space between the walls and the sink. And Eraser, Shoji said. I'm sorry about your partner. No, you're not, Shouta said, because Shoji wasn't. No, I'm not, Shoji admitted. I hope to see you back in the agency soon. Your payment for the mission will be forwarded directly to yours and Hisashi's account. Have a good day. The line went dead. Shouta sighed, taking Shoji's advice and quickly shoving the phone into his pocket and leaving the bathroom. He was halfway to Hisashi's room when he got another call, this time from a very familiar number. Hisashi's chosen contact name, shown on the label. Dumbass boss. Shouta accepted the call. I actually have work I have to get done and responsibilities, so I'll get to the point quickly. His boss said sharply from the other end of the line. You said you were taking off work for 2 days. It's been longer than that, and this happens far too often. I've given you chance and chance again. Shouta felt like his hands were shaking. You're fired. The line went dead before he could respond. With those damning words, the eye of the hurricane passed on. So, Aizawa not trusting when things are going his way, when things are happy, when things are good, that's a trauma response. It's a trauma response. When you feel uncomfortable when things are good, that is because you do not trust that because you know something's going to happen. Something has always happened to you. You've had such a horrible life that, traumatically speaking, you always expect something to go absolutely wrong. You always expect something to go wrong. Also, my dude, I hated that boss. I hated that boss. I hated that fucking boss. Oh my god. But the next chapter is called Tell Me What's Wrong. Should I read the summary? I'll read the summary. Something happened? Nemuri nodded from the other chair. You looked at your phone and you left the room, and when you came back, there was something wrong. What happened? Shouta didn't know what to say. He shrugged. Yes, you do, Nemuri insisted. Sho, I want to help. Believe me, I do, but I can't do that if you won't tell me what's wrong. Shouta felt a bit dazed. Now, I can't tell you what I'm going to predict on that chapter because, well, you see, I've read this fanfiction. Also, we're in chapter 26 is the last chapter. We're in chapter 21. We're 5 chapters away from this part of the series being over and the next part of the series coming up. right? So Someone Better, and then the next part of the Someone Better, or Little Cabbage series is what it's called. The next part of the, Someone Better is Somewhere Better, which has 21, and is not as lengthy as this one, but it's still quite lengthy. It's still about a book's worth of, a book worth length, a little bit more than an average book, like 20,000 words more than an average book. Well, this one is 30,000 words more than an average book, so it's 1,000 word difference, kind of. It literally is 1,000 word difference, a little more than 1,000. Not 1,000, 10,000. My bad. Obviously, in this chapter, we also get Death Hizashi. Woo woo! Death Hizashi. We love Hizashi being deaf. It is my favorite headcanon. I gaslit myself so much that I kind of forgot that it isn't canon. I forget that shit ain't canon. Y'all ever do that to yourself? That you forget that shits aren't canon, and then when you go and watch, like, the canonical thing, you're like, oh shit, that's just something that happens in the fandom, but the fandom all agreed. At least Hizashi being deaf, I don't think that's, like, a whole thing. I don't think that's, like, a canonical thing, right? Or Shota's parents being dead and him being an orphan. I see it a lot. Obviously not as much as, Hizashi being deaf. Hizashi being deaf is, like, almost in every fanfic. Like, it's kind of just a thing, right? It's just that. I have yet to see one where Hizashi isn't deaf. No, I saw one where he isn't deaf, right? But he still knows sign language, and he pretends to be deaf because everybody believes that he'll become deaf. But I think there was a Hero X Vigilante Eraser Mike fanfic, which was super cool. But yeah. Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.